This is Eagle News International, the Canadian edition. I'm Thomas I. Likeness reporting from our Eagle News studio in the Western Canadian province of Alberta. My city is Edmonton, and I'm here to bring you news and commentary from across Canada. In my part of the country, we're just emerging from a deep freeze. This is what it looked like last week. Temperatures near minus 30, wind chills in some parts of the province as low as minus 49. And this, of course, created all kinds of problems for people trying to get their vehicles started. Lots of dead batteries, stalled vehicles on the roadside. You can see these mechanics here, like these two. They're trying to keep, they were kept busy trying to get people going. For those with no place to stay, weather like this is dangerous. The city's scrambling to make sure there were enough places for homeless people so they had a place to sleep that was warm. A number of volunteer groups helped out by giving those in need a hot meal. And as we begin the week in Western Canada, things are beginning to warm up a bit. Temperatures should reach the freezing mark later this week, but the snow is going to be with us for another few months. The medical file now, COVID-19. Here's something we did not want to hear from Canadian health officials. Canada's top doctor, Dr. Theresa Tam, she heads up the Public Health Service. Dr. Tam warning us about a third wave of coronavirus. A third wave. This one being led by variants of the original virus. She's calling for extra vigilance, saying now is not the time to be easing up on restrictions. And she's not alone in ringing the warning bells. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says, yes, we've made progress. Case numbers are dropping.
I know you're probably watching the news these days attentively, as everyone is, and watching the positive sign of the cases going down across the country. That is a good step in the right direction. But we also know at the same time the new variants that are more communicable, more easily transmitted, are increasingly out there. So we need to stay careful. Nobody wants a third wave to start, particularly not one comprised of new, more communicable variants that can cause real challenges.
Trudeau says, remember, danger still lurks.
I think everyone understands that we need to be extra vigilant as we enter this phase of potential spread of these new variants. That's why things like contact tracing, rapid testing, the app, and continued careful choices by all Canadians not to gather and to keep distances are our best chance of getting through in the best way possible to the mass vaccinations that are coming in the coming months.
That variant has prompted the province of Newfoundland and Labrador to suspend in-person voting in the provincial election. That vote was to have gotten underway Saturday, but Dr. Janice Fitzgerald, the province's chief medical officer of health, says there's been a spike in new cases. She blames that on a variant of the virus.
The B117 variant that was first recognized in the UK is the COVID strain responsible for this outbreak in our province. We know that this variant spreads faster and easier. It is estimated to be 70% more transmissible than the original COVID strain, which explains the rapid explosion of cases this week.
Fitzgerald says there's a lot of unknowns about the variant.
What is not known is whether the variant strain causes more or less severe illness than the original strain. And while the vast majority of cases in our province have been mild or even had no symptoms, this could be because most of the affected individuals are young. Our greatest concern is how this variant could impact seniors, particularly those in congregate living facilities.
And those variants have the Chief Medical Officer of Health for British Columbia concerned. Dr. Bonnie Henry worried they may spread from neighboring Alberta, where more than 100 cases have been reported.
And not only from Alberta, from Ontario, there's a considerably higher rate in some areas of Ontario as well, and we know that there's still travel back and forth. It comes back to, the fundamental thing that we know about this virus. It's transmitted between people, and when we inadvertently or not, when we travel, we take the risk that we have with us, and we pick up the risk from where we're going and bring it home with us.
Prevention right now is our only weapon in the battle against the pandemic until enough of us are immunized. And what about the future? How often will we have to be immunized? There's no definite answer to that question. Dr. Henry thinks COVID-19 may be with us for a long time.
I think the way this virus has been shown to change, the mutations are slower than what we see with influenza and some of the other respiratory viruses. I think there's a growing sense from most of us that we're going to see it as a recurring respiratory virus in the respiratory season, so fall and winter for us over the coming years. But whether we have enough immunity that it's not going to cause these explosive outbreaks and lead to hospitalization and overwhelming of healthcare systems as we've seen in this past year. We hope that that's not going to happen, that things will settle down as immunity increases. And it may change to become a more benign respiratory virus like we've seen with some of the other coronaviruses over the years.
One of the challenges Trudeau's government has been facing is getting enough vaccine. Over the last few weeks, we've received only a fraction of the doses which the country ordered. This due to production problems with the manufacturers. Trudeau says things have been sorted out, though, with Pfizer and Moderna, and we have more on that story from Eagle News correspondent Andre Lejoie.
According to the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, Canada has recently ordered another 4 million doses of Moderna vaccine. Those doses will arrive during the summer and are on the top of the 40 million doses the country is already expecting from Moderna this year, bringing the total number of secured doses to 44 million. Today, the Honorable Anita Anand, Minister of Public Services and Procurement Canada, announced that Canada has negotiated an accelerated delivery schedule for Pfizer and biotech for COVID-19 vaccine. This means that Canada will receive 2.8 million additional doses of Pfizer between April and June, and an additional 6.2 million doses between July and September that was originally scheduled. In total, by the end of September 2021, Canada will have 84 million doses of the vaccines, Moderna and Pfizer BioNTech vaccine.
We've received an updated delivery schedule from Pfizer that brings us to the end of March, and we can confirm we will be receiving the 4 million doses we've been committed to since last November from Pfizer by the end of that month. We will share this schedule with provinces and territories so they can prepare to get all those doses into people's arms. For the months following from Pfizer, we'll be getting the next doses sooner. We've brought forward millions of doses into Q2, so that we will receive 10.8 million doses of Pfizer between April and June, and all of our remaining doses of Pfizer in Q3 before the end of September. That is, we will have received 40 million doses from Pfizer by the end of September. That's part of the reason why we can say with such confidence that everyone who wants a vaccine in Canada will get one by the end of September. We've been continuing to work every single day on getting as many doses as possible, as quickly as possible, into Canadians' arms. On top of this news on Pfizer, I can also share today that we've purchased 4 million additional doses of the Moderna vaccine, which will be arriving over the summer.
Our government continues to put every effort forward to protect Canadians from COVID-19. This includes taking all necessary measures to accelerate deliveries of vaccines to Canadians from approved suppliers. We remain fully on track to ensure that every eligible Canadians who wish to be vaccinated will be able to do so by the end of September, says the Honorable Anita Anand, Minister of Public Services and Procurement Canada. Reporting from Ottawa, Canada, for Eagle News, this is Andre Lejoie. We live in interesting times.
How do Canadians feel about the government's rollout of the vaccine so far? Well, they're not impressed, at least according to an Angus Reid poll released a few days ago. As Canadians watch allies such as the United States and the United Kingdom surge ahead in vaccine delivery, we stare at the closed sign at vaccine clinics. That's because they have no inoculants. According to Angus Reid, 3 out of 5 Canadians, or 59%, say the vaccine rollout in this country has been a dismal failure, the majority saying that's the result of poor planning and execution. And few Canadians believe Prime Minister Trudeau's promise that anyone who wants a vaccine will be able to get one by September. Just 28% figure the government will hit that target. As far as willingness to be vaccinated, 62% of those asked say they're ready to get their shot as soon as possible. 19% say, yes, I'll get vaccinated, but I want to wait a little bit first. 13% say absolutely not. They do not want to be immunized. Let's talk about travel restrictions now. A bunch of new ones are coming into effect. Starting today, a negative COVID PCR will be required for people coming into Canada by land if their travel was not essential. Essential workers, people like truck drivers and so on, people who work on one side of the border but live on the other, they're exempt. But it is going to affect a lot of people, especially snowbirds. A lot of them going to be returning home soon. Snowbirds, incidentally, the term given to people who escape the Canadian winter and head south to the warmer climates in the United States. Now, they're saying they should be exempt from that test as well as any quarantine expenses while they wait for the result of the test. Those expenses could run as high as $2,000, more than 75,000 pesos. Trudeau says provisions will be made for people whose travel was essential.
We're aware that we need to be thoughtful and compassionate about people who are in extremely difficult situations and absolutely need to travel. We're not trying to punish people. We're trying to keep people safe and keeping Canadians safe from the viruses and discouraging all non-essential travel and ensuring that if people do have to travel, they're doing the things that we can be certain are going to prevent the virus from spreading further in Canada, particularly given new variants.
The province of Ontario is delaying the annual March break for school students. That story from Eagle News correspondent April Masongsong.
Ontario Minister of Education Stephen Lecce announced Thursday that the province is officially postponing March break until April 16th. Here is the Education Minister for more details. Take a look.
Postponing March break, not canceling it, is an important way that schools can help to limit community transmission. We recognize that congregation is a key driver of the spread of COVID-19, something we realized over the winter break, and we will not take that risk again with your child, with our staff, with Ontario families. The decision is all more important as we move to protect our communities from the emerging variants of this disease.
Discouraging travel during this time is also one of the key reasons for this decision. Take a listen. Ontarians should refrain from traveling, particularly given the increase in new variants that pose a direct risk to our country. Please stay at home as much as possible and continue following the direction of public health officials. In response to this announcement, teacher unions across Ontario have expressed their collective disagreement. Their decision to postpone, despite unanimous opposition from unions representing educators and stakeholders in the sector, including all school board associations and the Ontario Principals Council, is another example of this government ignoring experts and making decisions that are reckless and baseless. In addition, ETFO questions the lack of clarity in the province's message. Why did Premier Doug Ford reopen the economy when it is clear risks remain? Is he concerned that his stay-at-home orders are ineffective? This decision demonstrates their lack of understanding about the stress and pressures of learning and working in a pandemic. Teachers and education workers have gone to extraordinary lengths to teach and support students every day since the start of the school year, whether in person or online. Their efforts should be applauded, not diminished. Executive Director for People for Education, Annie Kidder, asked about the upcoming reading week for post-secondary students. If it is advice from medical community that is driving the decision to cancel March break, then why aren't universities and colleges being told to cancel their breaks? Physical schools have been closed, but education has been ongoing since beginning of January. OP Council, CPCO official, and ADFO have all asked that March break take place on schedule. When asked about whether or not the scheduled break of the Ontario legislature, which also falls on the same week as March break, will also be cancelled, this is what Minister Lecce had to say.
The Ontario legislature is one of the few legislatures in the country that has sat throughout this pandemic in person. We sat through the summer and took action systematically throughout it to act in the public interest.
In Toronto, April Masong, Eagle News, we live in interesting times.
In Alberta, the province and federal government are giving frontline workers a one-time payment of $1,200. Premier Jason Kenney says about 380,000 workers will share in the $465 million pot of money. Kenney says the money is a way to reward them for their work of keeping people safe and the economy going during the pandemic.
They didn't have the luxury of working from home, and they never did. They've had to be out there on the job, not only to provide for their families, but to keep Alberta's economy, our infrastructure, and essential services running. And that means being increased to exposure of the virus.
Eligible workers include gas station attendants, school bus drivers, social workers, grocery cashiers, custodians, hospital orderlies, pharmacy assistants, counselors, and nurses. Private sector workers will have to make less than $25 an hour to qualify for the payment. Well, immigration has been a key to Canada's economic growth. You know, we have an aging population here and a low birth rate, and that's just not a good formula for growth. The pandemic has reduced the number of newcomers to our country to almost zero. Eagle News correspondent Marjorie Quintos tells us about an express entry draw which was held on the weekend, and this will allow thousands of people to apply for permanent residency in Canada.
Canada has made its record-breaking action by inviting 27,332 applicants to apply for permanent residency. Invitations made through express entry was made specific for applicants who are working in Canada or have worked in Canada for at least a year, also known as those candidates qualifying under the Canadian Experience class. Since its launch in 2015, the largest express entry draws have issued 5,000 permanent residence invitations. In other words, the recent draw is nearly 6 times larger than the previous record. Express entry is not an immigration program per se. It's an online management system that handles economic immigration programs in Canada. Under the express entry system, candidates compete with each other based on a comprehensive ranking system. This ranking system relies on the factors which include age, education, work experience inside and outside Canada, whether the applicant has a job offer in Canada or studies in Canada, and their language levels, which include in French and or English. Applicants who are invited to apply have 90 days to submit a complete and accurate permanent residence application, submit a no criminal record, and undergo medical examination. Candidates who make a false declaration about their background could be banned in Canada for at least 5 years. Canada's Immigration Minister, Marco Mendicino, recently said that Canada will make efforts to achieve the ambitious immigration targets by transitioning more temporary foreign workers to permanent residents during this pandemic. Michael Liefers, a licensed Canadian immigration consultant specialized in employer-driven immigration, shares his thoughts about this historic action by the government.
This is a very exciting moment in the history of the Express Entry program for both the international workers and the Canadian employers. It is a critical next step for everyone who has received an ITA to ensure they meet the 90-day deadline and the accurate information is submitted to support their profile.
In Montreal, Marjorie Quintos, Eagle News, we live in interesting time.
A Canadian company is launching the world's first exchange-traded Bitcoin fund. The Ontario Securities Commission gave Purpose Investments the nod to roll out the Purpose Bitcoin Exchange-Traded Fund. It will be found on the Toronto Stock Exchange. A company spokesman says it could start trading as early as next week. The company says the fund will be the first in the world to invest directly in physically settled Bitcoin instead of derivatives. It says it will allow investors easy and efficient access to the emerging asset class of cryptocurrency without the associated risk of self-custody within a digital wallet. Launched in 2009, Bitcoin has been on a meteoric rise since last March. That's when it stood at $5,000. It hit a record high of nearly $45,000 this past week. 2020 was a money-losing year for Air Canada. The airline posted a $1.16 billion loss. CEO Callan Ravinescu calls the last 12 months the bleakest year in aviation. Passenger loads dropped 73% as the pandemic kept travelers grounded. Ravinescu says he's encouraged by ongoing discussions with the federal government on a bailout package for the airline industry. In Montreal, good news for museum patrons. The city's Fine Arts Museum has reopened. Montreal's museums and galleries were forced to close last October 1st, along with restaurants, cinemas, and libraries. That's because of coronavirus cases shooting up. The museum usually receives more than 1 million visitors a year, up to 4,000 people on its busiest days. Now, though, the crowds will be smaller, limited to just 800 people a day. Visitors must purchase tickets online. Inside, signs remind people to maintain at least 2 meters of distance. Benches where people could sit and linger, well, they've been removed from the exhibition halls. Instead, masked visitors wander through the halls carrying folding chairs that they're offered when they come in. In sports, EBC's Tenny Samagi tells us Kevin Durant returns to the Bay Area as the Nets take on the Warriors at Chase Center.
Kevin Durant returned to the Nets lineup on Saturday to face his former team, the Golden State Warriors. The All-Star forward reflects his time with the Warriors, which included 2 NBA titles and 2 NBA Finals MVP.
I mean, it was cool. We came out, we played a great game, and we were focused from this morning, waking up for shoot around, and it was a good vibe all day. Tribute video was cool. I mean, I think about those moments daily. Every single moment that I had in this league, I think about it and try to analyze it and get better from it. My time here in Golden State was so much fun. It's such a big learning experience especially learning the game of basketball in a different philosophy. I'm gonna take that with me for the rest of my life. So tribute video was cool, but I'm always replaying those moments in my head.
The Nets will continue their West Coast swing in Sacramento as they face the Kings on Monday. In New York, Tenny Sumagi, Eagle News, we live in interesting times.
And that's our program for this evening. On behalf of our Canadian news team, I wish you all good health. Stay home, stay safe, and stay tuned to Eagle News for accurate and balanced coverage of the COVID-19 pandemic and other current affairs. In Edmonton, Canada, Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.